This story is titled, My Family Abandoned Me for My Golden Sister's Success. Now she's begging for my help. Hey everyone, we spend so much time finding these stories for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Let's grow together. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hi Reddit, I don't even know where to start with this, but I need to get it off my chest. For years, I've felt like I was invisible in my own family. And recently, I've realized just how deep that invisibility runs. My older sister, Sarah, 36 female, has always been the star of the family. She's the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I, 32 female, was just there. But the thing is, I'm done being invisible. I'm done letting them treat me like I don't matter. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, the favoritism was obvious from the start. I think even our neighbors knew Sarah was the one. She was smart, pretty, outgoing, all the things parents brag about. If Sarah aced a test, my mom would literally call our extended family to let them know. If I got the same grade, that's nice, sweetie. What's for dinner? It's not like I was some slacker. I worked hard, got good grades, and stayed out of trouble. But compared to Sarah, I was practically invisible. I was the quiet, bookish kid who preferred coding in my room to being the star of a school play. And honestly, I didn't mind at first. Sarah liked being the center of attention, and I didn't want the spotlight. But as we got older, the gap between us grew wider. Sarah's accomplishments became family milestones. The time she was prom queen, the time she got into her dream college, the time she graduated from a top-tier business school, each one was celebrated like she'd won an Olympic medal. I remember when she got accepted into her business school. My parents were over the moon. They didn't just pay for her tuition, they went all out. She got a swanky apartment in a fancy part of town, a new wardrobe to fit in, and even money for spring break trips. Meanwhile, I was in high school at the time, trying to figure out how I'd even afford college. The answer? Student loans, part-time jobs, and a lot of stress. Fast forward a few years. I graduated college with honors in computer science. It wasn't easy. I juggled 2 part-time jobs, took out loans, and basically ran on caffeine and stress for 4 years. When I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, I felt like I'd climbed Mount Everest. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud. Instead, my mom said, That's nice, honey. Did you see the photos from Sarah's graduation? Isn't she stunning in that dress? Yeah, that's my life. For a while, I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter. I had a decent job as a project manager at a digital company, and I was making enough to pay my bills. But I wanted more. I wanted to climb the ladder, maybe even start my own company one day. That's when I decided to apply for an MBA program. It wasn't just any program. It was at one of the best schools in the country. I knew it would be a game changer for my career. But there was one big hurdle: the cost. Tuition was 6 figures. 6. I knew I couldn't afford it on my own, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked my parents for help. Let me set the scene. It was a family dinner, and as usual, the conversation was all about Sarah. She'd just pulled off some big success at the family restaurant, more on that later, and my parents were practically glowing with pride. I waited until dessert to bring it up. I told them about the MBA program, explained how it would open doors for me, and then, hesitantly, asked if they could help with tuition or even just co-sign a loan. You'd think I asked them to sell a kidney. My mom clutched her chest like I'd just insulted her. My dad's face went red. We can't afford that, they said. We already paid for Sarah's education. Now we need to focus on the family restaurant and our retirement. Okay, I get it. MBAs are expensive, but they didn't just say no to paying. They refused to even co-sign a loan. It wasn't like I was asking for a handout. I was asking for help, just enough so I wouldn't drown in debt for the rest of my life. The part that stung the most? Mom's reasoning. She looked me in the eye and said, Sarah's education was an investment in the family business. Your MBA would only benefit you, wouldn't it? Only benefit me? Like I wasn't part of this family. Like my success didn't matter because it wasn't tied to their plans. It felt like a slap in the face. I was angry. But more than that, I was hurt. Sarah's education was a family investment, but mine was a waste of money? I felt like I was back in high school, invisible and unimportant. But I wasn't a teenager anymore. I wasn't going to let them stop me. That's when I turned to Aunt Margaret. Margaret is my dad's older sister, and let me tell you, she's a badass. She's a neurosurgeon. Yeah, a literal brain surgeon. And she's always been the cool aunt who takes no crap from anyone. My parents have always had this weird tension with her. They pretend to be polite at family gatherings, but I've overheard them bad-mouthing her success. My dad especially hates feeling overshadowed by her. He once called her arrogant because she didn't let him win an argument. Seriously, I wasn't sure if she'd help, but I was desperate. I called her one evening, explained the situation, and asked if she could loan me some money for tuition. Her response? "Why didn't you come to me earlier? Of course I'll help. I believe in you." I cried. Not the cute, movie kind of crying, the ugly, snotty kind. For the first time in my life, someone in my family believed in me. She didn't see me as the awkward little sister or the family afterthought. She saw potential. Margaret covered my tuition without hesitation, but we both knew it had to stay a secret. If my dad found out, he'd lose his mind. He'd see it as me going behind his back, and Sarah would probably make it her mission to ruin things. So we kept it quiet, and for a while, everything was fine. But secrets don't stay secrets for long. And when Sarah found out, everything I'd worked for came crashing down. Update 1 point. Hey Reddit, back again. So, after Aunt Margaret helped me with my MBA tuition, I thought the worst was behind me. My plan was to keep my head down, finish school, and prove to myself, and maybe a little to my family, that I was worth something. For a while, things were calm. Too calm in hindsight. I should have known it wouldn't last. I still don't know exactly how Sarah found out about the arrangement with Aunt Margaret. Maybe she overheard something. Maybe she snooped through my emails. Not a stretch. She was always the type to read over your shoulder when you were on your phone. Either way, she found out. And in true Sarah fashion, she didn't just confront me or talk to me like a normal person. Oh no, she went full nuclear. The night everything went down, I was coming home after a long day at work. I'd been busting my ass trying to keep up with my job while prepping for my MBA orientation. I was feeling good, excited even. For once, it felt like my life was moving in the right direction. As soon as I walked in the door, though, I knew something was wrong. The house was silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the tense, heavy kind. The air felt off, like the calm before a storm. My heart sank, but I tried to push the feeling aside. Maybe they're just tired, I told myself. Yeah, no. When I stepped into the living room, my blood ran cold. All my stuff, my books, my clothes, my bedding, was packed into boxes, just sitting there, like a giant neon sign saying you don't belong here anymore. I stared at the boxes, trying to process what I was seeing. Was this some kind of prank? Did I forget we were moving or something? Then I noticed Sarah. She was standing off to the side, arms crossed, with this smug, satisfied look on her face. My parents were sitting on the couch, their expressions a mix of anger and disappointment. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaky. My dad didn't waste any time. He grabbed a stack of papers from the coffee table and threw them at me. "Explain this," he demanded. Confused, I picked up the papers and started flipping through them. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it hit me. They were emails, fake emails, between me and Aunt Margaret. They made it look like I'd betrayed the family. According to these emails, I'd sold the family restaurant's trade secrets to Aunt Margaret in exchange for her paying my tuition. Recipes, supplier details, financial records, it was all there. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The emails were completely fabricated. I'd never even seen half the stuff they were accusing me of sharing. And honestly, I didn't even have access to most of it. But you know who did? Sarah. It was obvious she doctored these emails. I mean, come on. She was the one working at the restaurant, not me. She had access to all the sensitive information. But my parents didn't care. They didn't even question it. Sarah handed them proof, and that was all they needed. "This isn't real," I stammered. "These emails, they're fake. I didn't do this." My mom was crying, and my dad looked like he was about to explode. "We trusted you," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "How could you betray us like this?" I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. I begged them to look closer, to see the obvious signs that the emails were forged. But they didn't care. Sarah stood there, silent but smug, her arms still crossed. She didn't have to say a word. Her face said it all. She'd won. "Pack your things and leave," my dad said, his voice cold and final. "We won't have a traitor in this house." I looked at my mom, hoping, praying she'd stand up for me. But she just sat there, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head. She couldn't even look at me. Sarah, meanwhile, didn't bother hiding her satisfaction. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me erased. That was it. My own family, the people who were supposed to love and support me, were throwing me out based on a pack of lies. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to fight, to make them see the truth. But another part of me knew it was pointless. They'd made up their minds. In their eyes, I was guilty. And nothing I said would change that. So I packed my car with the few boxes of belongings I had left. As I loaded up the last box, I noticed the neighbors peeking through their windows. They were probably wondering what kind of drama was going down. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely alone. Once I was in my car, I did the only thing I could think of. I called Aunt Margaret. I was crying so hard, I could barely get the words out. I told her everything. How Sarah had found out. How she'd forged the emails. How my parents had kicked me out without even giving me a chance to defend myself. "Come to my place," Margaret said, her voice calm but firm. "Right now. We'll figure this out together." I drove to her apartment that night, tears blurring my vision the whole way. When I got there, she hugged me so tightly, I thought I might break. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone. The next few days were a blur. Margaret offered me a place to stay and assured me she'd still cover my tuition. She didn't care what my parents or Sarah thought. "You have potential," she told me, "and I'm not letting their pettiness get in the way of your future." I tried to focus on preparing for my MBA program, but the memory of that night haunted me. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. My parents' angry faces, Sarah's smug smile, my mom's tears. It felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Part of me wanted to fight back. I knew I could prove the emails were fake if I dug deep enough, but another part of me was so tired. Tired of trying to earn my family's approval. Tired of being treated like I didn't matter. Maybe it was time to let go. Margaret was my rock during those weeks. She kept reminding me that this was a chance to start fresh, to build a life on my terms. "Sometimes," she said, "the best thing you can do is walk away." And she was right. It was time to stop chasing their approval. It was time to focus on myself. Update 2.0. Hey Reddit, I'm back. Writing this feels therapeutic, but also surreal. After being kicked out of my parents' house, I stayed with Aunt Margaret, trying to piece my life back together. It was hard. Really hard. I was heartbroken, angry, and honestly, a little lost. But what I didn't realize at the time was that getting thrown out was the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me take you back to those first few weeks. I was an emotional wreck. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's smug face. I kept replaying the moment my dad called me a traitor, the way my mom couldn't even look at me. The rejection stung like hell. I'd always known I wasn't their favorite, but this was on a whole other level. They threw me out of the house based on Sarah's lies, without even giving me a chance to explain myself. Aunt Margaret was my anchor during those dark days. She gave me a safe space to cry, vent, and process everything that had happened. She never judged me or told me to get over it. She just listened. She reminded me over and over that I wasn't the problem. "They've been blinded by favoritism for so long they can't see what they're losing," she said. "But you don't need their approval to succeed." I clung to her words like a lifeline. She was right. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to live in Sarah's shadow. I didn't have to measure myself against their impossible expectations. I was free. But being free came with its own challenges. I still had to figure out how to navigate my MBA program while dealing with the emotional fallout. Classes started a few weeks after I moved in with Aunt Margaret, and I threw myself into them like my life depended on it. Honestly, it kind of did. I needed to prove to myself that I was capable, that I wasn't the failure my family had always made me feel like. The MBA program was intense. The workload was heavy, the competition was fierce, and the expectations were sky high. But you know what? I thrived. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued my skills and ideas. My professors saw potential in me, my classmates respected me, and I started to believe in myself in a way I never had before. It wasn't easy, though. There were days when the weight of everything felt unbearable. I'd be sitting in class, trying to focus on a lecture about corporate strategy, and suddenly my mind would drift back to that night. The boxes, the fake emails, my dad's cold voice telling me to leave. I'd have to excuse myself and hide in the bathroom until the tears stopped. But every time I felt like giving up, I thought about Aunt Margaret. She'd invested so much in me, not just financially, but emotionally. I couldn't let her down. More importantly, I couldn't let myself down. So I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I stayed up late studying, volunteered for every group project, and networked like crazy. I learned to trust my instincts and speak up in class discussions. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my confidence. By the time I graduated, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Graduating at the top of my class felt like a victory, not just over the program, but over everything my family had put me through. For once, I didn't feel like the awkward, forgotten sister. I felt like me, capable, strong, worthy. After graduation, I landed a job at a prestigious consulting firm. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of: challenging, fast-paced, and full of opportunities for growth. I threw myself into my work with the same intensity I'd brought to my MBA program. And you know what? Paid off. My bosses noticed my dedication, my clients appreciated my insights, and my colleagues respected me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. During this time, I also grew closer to Aunt Margaret. She wasn't just my aunt anymore. She was my family. Every week we'd have dinner together, talking about everything from her medical cases to my latest work projects. She taught me so much about standing up for myself, valuing my worth, and not letting anyone dictate my future. Meanwhile, my parents and Sarah, silence. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first it hurt. I kept hoping they'd reach out, apologize, admit they were wrong. But as time went on, I realized their absence was a blessing. Without their constant criticism and favoritism weighing me down, I was finally free to focus on myself. 3 years went by like that. I built a life I was proud of, a career I loved, friendships that felt genuine, and a sense of self-worth that I'd never had before. I thought I was done with my family drama. But then, out of nowhere, Sarah showed up at my door. I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished, confident Sarah I'd grown up with. She looked different, tired. Her eyes were shadowed, her clothes were wrinkled, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. For a moment, I just stared at her, not sure what to say. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet. "Can we talk?" I didn't want to let her in. Every part of me screamed to slam the door in her face. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on my couch, fidgeting nervously. I could tell she didn't want to be there, but she was desperate. Finally, she blurted it out. "I need your help." Apparently, the family restaurant, the golden child of our family, the thing my parents had sacrificed everything for, was failing. The expansion had been a disaster, and they were drowning in debt. Bankruptcy was looming, and my parents were panicking. Sarah had tried to fix things, but it was too much for her to handle alone. "Dad's talking about filing for bankruptcy," she said, her voice breaking. "Mom's a wreck. I don't know what to do." I sat there, stunned. After everything they'd done to me, now they wanted my help? The irony was almost laughable. I wanted to tell her to leave, to handle her own mess the way I'd handled mine. But part of me, some small, stupid part, felt something. Not pity, exactly. Maybe obligation. Maybe curiosity. Maybe just the ghost of the bond we used to have as sisters. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She hesitated. "You're doing so well, with your MBA and your job. I was hoping you could, I don't know, help? Maybe give us some advice?" Or, she didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what she was really asking. She wanted money. They all did. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I was furious. After 3 years of silence, they only cared about me now because they needed something. And Sarah's half-assed apology? "I messed up. I'm sorry." It wasn't enough. Not even close. Reddit. I don't know what to do. Do I help them, or do I let them sink? Update 3. Hey Reddit, I'm back again. If you've been following along, you know how messy this situation has been. After 3 years of silence, Sarah came to my door asking for help. She looked nothing like the confident, put-together person I remembered. She was desperate, her words spilling out as if she was clinging to a lifeline. And honestly, I felt torn. When Sarah left that night, I was furious, confused, and a little sad. Part of me wanted to slam the door on her and everything she represented. The years of favoritism, the betrayal, the lies. But another part of me, a tiny voice buried under all the anger, couldn't help but feel something. I don't know if it was pity, obligation, or just the lingering bond of siblinghood. Whatever it was, it kept me from shutting her out completely. But then, just when I thought I had time to process it all, my parents showed up. Yup, you read that right. My parents showed up at my workplace. Let me set the scene. It was a normal afternoon at the office. I was in the middle of a meeting, presenting a strategy proposal to a client, when my assistant buzzed me. "There are 2 people in the lobby asking for you," she said. "They say they're your parents?" I froze. My parents hadn't contacted me in over 3 years. Not a single phone call, text, or email. And now they were here? At my office? My heart was racing as I excused myself and headed to the lobby. There they were. My dad, who once seemed larger than life, looked older and smaller somehow. His shoulders were hunched, and his face was lined with exhaustion. My mom, who always prided herself on looking polished, had gray hair that was pulled back in a messy bun. They looked defeated. "Can we talk?" my dad asked, his voice rough and low. I didn't want to have this conversation at work, so I took them to a coffee shop down the street. We sat in awkward silence, the weight of 3 years of estrangement hanging between us. I didn't say anything. I wanted them to speak first. My mom was the first to break the silence. "We were wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "We should never have kicked you out. We should have listened to you. We're sorry." I'd dreamed about this moment for years, my parents admitting they were wrong, apologizing for what they did. But now that it was happening, I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness. Maybe it was too little, too late. Then my dad spoke. "We want you to come home. We're going through a tough time, but we can get through it together as a family." That's when the truth started to come out. The restaurant wasn't just failing, it was a full-blown disaster. My parents had overextended themselves with the expansion, taking on massive loans they couldn't repay. They'd also been cutting corners to save money, which led to tax issues, health code violations, and even some shady supplier deals. Now they were on the verge of bankruptcy and facing potential legal trouble, and they wanted me to save them. "We need your help," my dad said. "With your business knowledge, your connections, you could help us turn things around." I sat there, stunned. The audacity of it all was overwhelming. They threw me out of their house based on fake emails. They didn't contact me for 3 years. And now, when they were desperate, they expected me to bail them out? "Let me get this straight," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You kicked me out, believed Sarah's lies without question, didn't speak to me for 3 years, and now you want me to risk everything I've worked for to save you from your own mistakes?" My mom reached across the table to grab my hand, tears streaming down her face. "We know we don't deserve your help," she said, "but we're family. Families stick together." That word, family, hit me like a punch to the gut. For years, I'd been chasing their approval, trying to be part of this family that never saw me as enough. And now they were using it as a bargaining chip? I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "But I can't help you. You're asking me to risk my career, my reputation, and everything I've built for myself. I won't do it." The look on their faces was a mix of shock and anger. My dad's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and cold. "What have you done for me? Denied me support for my education while paying for Sarah's? Threw me out of the house based on fake evidence? Ignored me for 3 years? You haven't done anything for me." My mom was sobbing openly now, but I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. I stood up and grabbed my bag. "I'm sorry you're in this situation," I said, looking them both in the eye. "But this is the result of your own choices. I can't save you." As I walked away, my dad shouted after me, "You'll regret this. You're abandoning your family." I stopped and turned back. "You abandoned me first," I said, my voice steady. "Now you'll have to live with that." That night, I thought long and hard about everything. Walking away from my parents felt like closure, but it wasn't enough. They weren't just failing financially. They were breaking the law. If they kept going, more people could get hurt, whether it was employees losing their jobs or customers eating at an unsafe restaurant. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I reported them. I contacted the IRS, the health department, and the appropriate authorities. I gave them all the information I knew, making it clear that I wasn't involved in their operations. It wasn't an easy choice. Part of me felt like I was betraying them, but another part of me knew it was the right thing to do. The fallout was swift. The restaurant was shut down pending investigation, and my parents and Sarah were facing serious legal consequences. Sarah called me, screaming and crying, accusing me of ruining the family. My parents left voicemails alternating between begging for help and threatening legal action. But I didn't back down. Aunt Margaret was my rock through it all. She reminded me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's necessary. "You didn't ruin the family," she said. "They did that to themselves." As of now, the investigation is ongoing. My parents' world is crumbling, and Sarah is scrambling to pick up the pieces. But me? I'm finally free. Free from their manipulation, their favoritism, and their toxicity. I've built a life I'm proud of, a career I love, friendships that are genuine, and a sense of self-worth that doesn't rely on their approval. Thank you, Reddit, for listening, supporting, and helping me through this journey. Your kindness and advice have meant more to me than I can put into words. Here's to fresh starts, found families, and living life on our own terms. Cheers!